Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned for the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show. It's the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show once again, where we talk about the greatest adventure writer of all time, Edgar Rice Burroughs. And in today's thrilling episode, we're going to be talking about the next 15 Edgar Rice Burroughs books that I am going to read. I'm reading or rereading all of the Edgar Rice Burroughs books, all the books Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote, more or less in publication order. It gets a little tricky because some of his books he wrote in multiple parts that were published in magazines over time, and at the same time there were other Edgar Rice Burroughs stories going on, so it could be a little tricky. But this is more or less in the order that he wrote them, and I've been doing this for a little while now, but I've been reading a bunch of other stuff at the same time. But yeah, let's talk about the next 15 Edgar Rice Burroughs books that I'm going to read, and then another book that Edgar Rice Burroughs didn't write. So the next 15 books I'm going to read from Edgar Rice Burroughs. The first one is this one, The Writer by Edgar Rice Burroughs, with this really cool, moody cover by Frank Frazetta. So this is cool. I don't remember if I read this. I don't know that I did. I first read Edgar Rice Burroughs when I was in my, mid to late teens. And I found most of Edgar Rice Burroughs' books, but I don't know if at the time I had found a copy of this. I don't know when I picked this up. But I think I picked this up sometime in my adulthood. And I don't know that I've ever read this book. If I did, I don't remember anything about it. All I know about this book, I think, is that it's about a highwayman, and I know nothing else about it. So, Edgar Rice Burroughs, The Writer. This is the next one I'm going to be reading. It's not particularly long, and I will tell you all about it once I've read it. So, The Writer, with this really cool cover. That's the next Edgar Rice Burroughs book I'm going to read, and I don't know if I've ever read it before. This next book I've definitely read a few times, though. This is the 6th book in the Tarzan series. This is Jungle Tales of Tarzan, another fantastic Frank Frazetta cover. I think this is the cover, if I'm remembering right, that Penguin used for their Black Spine edition of Tarzan of the Apes. And if this is the one, and I think it was, it's a good choice, because I think this is probably my favorite Tarzan cover that Frazetta did. It's a nice one. And this is the last book in the kind of first phase of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan novels. And this comes right after Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar. And this book takes us back to Tarzan's youth in the jungle and tells a bunch of adventures that Tarzan had when he was a young man in the jungle, before he had met Jane and gone to civilization and found out he was Lord Greystoke and all that. At this point, he's just young Tarzan out in the jungle. And I remember this being really good. I like this one, Jungle Tales of Tarzan. So, looking forward to reading this. Love the Tarzan books, and this is one of the best Tarzan books, I think. Jungle Tales of Tarzan. So, there's that one. The next one is another book I've never read. This is The Oakdale Affair. The Oakdale Affair. And another Frank Frazetta cover. And this time he just paints a big bear. It's a big bear painted by Frank Frazetta for The Oakdale Affair, which I think is a Western. I'm pretty sure that this one is a Western. Don't know much about this one either. This was one I definitely wasn't able to find when I was first reading Edgar Rice Burroughs as a teenager. And I found this one in recent years, I think. And now it is time to read The Oakdale Affair by Edgar Rice Burroughs. He wrote a few Westerns. He wrote a few of them. The Apache series were his really good ones. This one, I don't know if it's good or not. I will tell you after I read it. The Oakdale Affair with a big, awesome bear. So, that's that. And the next one, let me shuffle things around down here. I'm shuffling. Okay, the next one is one of his greatest books. This is The Land That Time Forgot. One of his best science fiction fantasy stories. You will find this in mass market paperbacks as 3 different books. Ace Books printed this as 3 separate books, which were The Land That Time Forgot, The People That Time Forgot, and Out of Time's Abyss. But the original book publication published it as 1 book, and that's how I'm counting it, as 1 volume. And that's what this is. This is the commemorative edition of The Land That Time Forgot. It's really, really good. It's, like I said, one of Edgar Rice Burroughs' best books, in my opinion, about the lost island of Caspak, I think. Yes, Caspak, with its impassable cliffs. And on Caspak, there are a bunch of dinosaurs. Of course, you've got to have dinosaurs if you're talking about a Lost World adventure. And, some other creepy things. And there's some other creepy things going on The Land That Time Forgot. I'm really looking forward to reading this again. It's been a long, long time since I've read this book. So that's going to be cool. Next, we have Tarzan The Untamed. This is Tarzan The Untamed. And this is a really good Tarzan book. This is the first book of kind of the second phase of Tarzan. I'll talk about all this in my next episode of the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show, where I'm going to do an in-depth conversation about the Tarzan series. This is a great Tarzan adventure which takes place during World War I. And so it's a little hard on the Germans, considering the time in which it was written. But excellent book. This is excellent. And I don't remember the cover artist here. He did a whole line of these books. And so let me see if they tell me who the cover artist is. This is Dick Powers. Dick Powers apparently did this cover art. His series of Tarzan covers were not my favorite. They're not my favorite. But yeah, this is Tarzan The Untamed. The book is awesome. The book is just so good. This next book is a book I definitely never read. And I probably never read it because it's called The Efficiency Expert. It's The Efficiency Expert, which doesn't sound like the most exciting story in the world. And this is another one of those books which I wasn't able to find when I was first reading these books as a teenager. Of course, there were no Kindles or ebooks or internet back then. The only way you could read Edgar Rice Burroughs were to find actual physical copies of his books. And I wasn't able to find this one at the time. And so The Efficiency Expert, this will be my first time reading this, which I think is kind of a gangster crime kind of story. I think. Certainly it gives you that vibe from the cover with the cowering efficiency expert there. I'm assuming that's him, about to get, his ass handed to him. He doesn't exactly look like one of Edgar Rice Burroughs' mightier heroes, but, I haven't read the book. So this is one of his, I think, realistic novels, which he could have not written this and written another Mars book, but instead he wrote The Efficiency Expert. Oh, well. Okay, the next book is awesome. This is the 8th book in the Tarzan series. This is Tarzan The Terrible, with that really awesome Boris Vallejo cover. That's a really great cover. So again, more dinosaurs. This time it's Tarzan who comes across the dinosaurs. This is excellent. Tarzan finds a lost world in Africa. There are a few of those, as it turns out. This takes place right after the last book. It just continues right on. The story continues right on into this. And it's excellent. This is just a dynamite Tarzan adventure. Really looking forward to reading this again. And like I said, awesome cover from Boris Vallejo. That one's really, really good. I like this series of Tarzan books. These are probably my favorite with the black borders on them. And most of the covers were done by Boris Vallejo, and a few were done by Neil Adams. But it was a great line of Tarzan books. So yeah, that one's cool. And then we finally go back to Mars. My favorite series from Edgar Rice Burroughs was the Barsoom series, the Mars series of books. And the next one I'll be reading is the Chessman of Mars, which is one of the longer books from Edgar Rice Burroughs. I know this book took him longer to write than a lot of his other adventure stories, and it's an excellent one. I like The Chessman an awful lot. This one focuses not on John Carter, but on John Carter's daughter, actually, who gets herself into some trouble in this book, runs into the Chessman of Mars and some other terrible things. But it's excellent. And this series of Valentine books was really cool. Has all the covers on the back. This was a cool line, this one. So The Chessman is the next book I'll be reading after Tarzan the Terrible. Then we get this book, which does have a cool Boris Vallejo cover. This is The Girl from Hollywood. It's The Girl from Hollywood. Originally titled The Penningtons, if I'm remembering correctly. And this was another one of his realistic novels, which takes place out west, but it wasn't a traditional Western in that it took place in the Old West. I think this was written and it took place probably in the 1920s. But they do a good job of making the cover Western. I don't remember this being very good at all. I know I've read this. It has some points of interest, but it's more of a curiosity than anything else, I think. But maybe I'll feel differently when I read it this time up. It's The Girl from Hollywood. That's The Girl from Hollywood right there. She's not being very helpful. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But thank goodness after this we get to go back to Tarzan with Tarzan and the Golden Lion. It's Tarzan and the Golden Lion. Jad Bal Jaw is the Golden Lion. And the Golden Lion, his pal, makes some reappearances in the Tarzan series. And this is from the white bordered series of Tarzan. And does it tell me who the cover artist is? Let's find out. Cover painting by Robert Abbott. So Robert Abbott did this cover. I kind of like these white bordered Tarzan series too. There's something sort of cheesy about them, but the black bordered ones were better with Boris Vallejo, of course. This is an excellent book. I think this book just went into the public domain a couple years ago, if I'm remembering right. So you can get this one for free, like a lot of the earlier Tarzan stories. Tarzan and the Golden Lion. I remember this one being pretty good. Okay, so the next book is actually, I have it here as 2 books, although in its first book publication, this was published all as 1 book. And this is The Moon Maid. The Moon Maid. And so this is the first part of The Moon Maid. Stories that take place inside the moon in the future. And there are 3 parts to this story, actually, published in 2 ace books or 1 big volume if you buy the original 1-volume edition. This is a great Roy Krinkle cover of the Moon Maid. That's excellent. There was another edition that has a really excellent Frank Frazetta cover, if I'm remembering right. But Krinkle did the original version, which is this one for Ace Books. This continues on into The Moon Men, and this actually has 2 stories in it that continue the story of the Moon Maid. That cover is not great. Who does that cover? Who does that cover? Because I don't remember. Let's see if it says. Cover by Ed Emsch. Cover by Ed Emsch. I don't know why they didn't get Krinkle to do that cover. The inside illustration is done by Roy Krinkle. So that's awesome. But that is definitely not Roy Krinkle there. But this was excellent. This is altogether an excellent book, The Moon Maid. So this will be fun to read. Once again, it's been a long time since I've read The Moon Maid. And then, after The Moon Maid, we get to a book that I actually do not have a physical copy of, which I just discovered when I was putting this video together. I realized I don't have a physical copy of this book. I do have an ebook copy, so I will be forced to read this on this Kindle because this is all I've got. The Bandit of Hell's Bend, which is another Edgar Rice Burroughs Western story, which I'm sure I've never read since I don't have a physical copy and probably never had one. But I will let you know all about The Bandit of Hell's Bend after I read it on this newfangled e-reading device. I think that's the one Edgar Rice Burroughs book I don't have a physical copy of. So, after that, though, we go back to Tarzan. He really, Tarzan was popular. So he wrote a lot of Tarzan books. And this one is Tarzan and the AntMan. This one was pretty wild. Another great Boris Vallejo cover. This was an interesting Tarzan story. He used a lot of his imagination to put this story together. Another lost world in Africa, because they were all over the place in Africa back then. These lost worlds, lost cities. And this is Tarzan and the AntMan when he comes across a bunch of tiny people and becomes tiny himself. It's a thrill ride of adventure. It's awesome. I remember really liking this one. It's been a long time since I've read it, though. It's been a long time since I've read it. This is the 10th book in the Tarzan series. Now, that was followed up by Marcia of the Doorstep. Marcia of the Doorstep, which is this book. This book's a little hard to find, actually. This is a hardcover from Donald M. Grant. Yeah, this is a Donald M. Grant edition. And it's a really nice one. And I just got this at some point in the last few years, I picked this up. And this is another one of his realistic novels. And this edition does have some cool artwork in it. And this is, I think, one of his longest books, I think. Then we've got a shipwreck there, a whole shipwreck going on. So I will tell you all about this one after I read it. Marcia of the Doorstep. That should be interesting. And then that's followed by book number 15 of this list. And we're going back to Mars with the Mastermind of Mars. The Mastermind of Mars, which was excellent. I do remember that this book was excellent. And we get a new hero. John Carter is not in this. Well, he's not the main character in this. He does appear. And it's not about John Carter or anybody in the John Carter family. It's Ulysses Paxton, the only other Earthman who went to Mars. Ulysses Paxton. And that is an interesting story in itself, and I will tell you all about it after I read this book. So, those are all the Edgar Rice Burroughs books that I'm going to read, but there's another book I'm going to mention that I'm going to read, and that's a book I started, actually. When I first started rereading Edgar Rice Burroughs, I picked this up. This is Edgar Rice Burroughs, the man who created Tarzan, and I started reading it, and it was really good. But the problem is that I did something that it turns out I just can't do, which is read more than one book at a time. Basically, I was reading this in the morning and I was reading whatever else I was reading during the day. And whenever I try to read more than one book at a time, it just doesn't work out for me. One book I end up reading and the other book ends up sitting. And that's what happened with this, even though this is a really, really interesting biography and it's really, really good. I have to read it on its own. And I started it, and I've just got to finish it. And I will at some point in the near future, I think. As soon as I have a couple weeks free to finish up this book, I will do it. It's really large. It's really awesome. It has a ton of information in this book about Edgar Rice Burroughs. It's got a ton of photographs that I've never seen anyplace else outside of this book. It's really, really cool. It's really, really cool. So, Edgar Rice Burroughs, The Man Who Created Tarzan by Erwin Porgs. Did want to mention this since I will be reading that. Also, okay guys, that's all I have to say for today. The next time I do an Edgar Rice Burroughs show, it will be on the Tarzan series, where we really, really go in depth about the Tarzan series. That'll be awesome. And I will catch you next time.